Bob Thompson began taking evening art classes at Sacramento City College during the 1980s while working full-time for the state of California. After working in several media, he settled on making clay sculptures and doing some printmaking. His most recent work focuses on clay and clay sculpture for display in gardens and other areas around the home. And I know Bob a little bit, so I'm excited to talk to him today. Hi, Bob.
Hello, Gioia. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Good morning. Or good afternoon. It just happened. All right.
Just turned over, huh?
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your current body of work. Sounds like you've been making some outdoor sculptures.
Yes, I've been focusing on making clay turtles. And I have some, I'm not sure if you can see them, but there's some here on the workbench.
There they are.
And they're in a variety of stages. I also have some heads that I've made that I put around the yard during the regular season, just as something to liven up the yard. But I've been mostly spending time making these clay turtles, and they come in a variety of sizes. I only have a couple that are finished here, but as you can see, there's others that haven't been fired yet, and there's some actually that I'm still working on that are under plastic. And the idea, I kind of think of them as boundary art. And what I mean by that is they're sort of halfway between the sort of natural art where you try to capture something that's in nature or that you see around you, like the people started art when they were painting different animals on the cave walls, and modern art, which is more just based on line, shape, and color. And so I try to make the turtle at least a little natural looking, although I still have a long way to go in terms of making them look like a real turtle. But then I use the shell to create designs, which are basically line, shape, and color. And that's more sort of the modern art part of it. And so I've used the shells, I think, without fail to create a different design each time.
Tell me, like, turtles resonate with me. I think they're really special creatures.
They are.
I mean, out of all the critters that you could gravitate towards, what is it about a turtle that's special to you?
Well, I think in part, I was reading about turtles, and some people have them as pets. And apparently the turtles, in many cases, outlive the people who are hosting them in their home. So they have to make some kind of provision in their will or their trust or whatever it might be to have somebody take over the mentorship of the turtle, because the turtle will outlive its host. And I especially think of that when I make something in ceramics, because a lot of these ceramics will live on well after we're gone. And so it's sort of a idea that you can make something that will live on after you have left the earth. And so that's, I guess, why I picked turtles. And also when I first started making them, they were basically slab, and they were fairly easy to put together, and they were fairly flat. And I've sort of graduated a little bit so that they look more like a real turtle.
Tell us a little bit about your artistic process.
Okay, well, as you can see behind me, there's a bunch of stuff on the walls here that, like this one's a pen and ink drawing, and then there's a number of them are etchings. I started doing, actually, I was introduced into art by going to a night class with George Esquivel at City College, and started by throwing pots. And I got doing that, and then I sort of branched out into a number of other things and just tried to do different things that would sort of exercise that part of my brain, or maybe in some cases like making pots or making sculpture, it exercises your hand to eye coordination and kind of how handy you are with your hands. And that sort of intrigued me as a way of developing other skills that I didn't have during my day job, which was more like an analytical job and typing and thought process and so forth.
Do you see
And
any correlation between your printmaking work and your clay work? Is there anything about those processes that is similar, or is it one is a relief from the other?
no, I think they're very similar in some ways because of, so printmaking, for example, you have to sit and create a plate with a vision in your mind as to what the plate's actually going to print out to be. And you can't really tell because everything's in reverse, and it looks a lot different on a plate because you don't, in some cases, have any color to it. You don't have anything other than what you have in your mind. And so the same thing is true of like making ceramic sculptures, because there's a there's a time lag between creating something and then actually seeing what it looks like, because in clay sculpture, you mold something and carve it and then think that it's finally done and let it dry, and then you take it and put it in a kiln and fire it. It comes out looking a little different. Sometimes it shrinks quite a bit, and but you have a finished, so-called finished product because you have a piece of bisqueware. But then you glaze it, and when you glaze it, what you put on doesn't always match up with what it's going to look like in the final analysis. You have some idea of how glazes are going to work together sometimes or not work together. And then also in terms of printing, when you roll up a plate and or you put ink on the plate and wipe it and do different things to make it look a certain way, you have in your mind what you think it's going to look like. But then when you put it through the press, or when you put the ceramic sculpture back in the kiln for a glaze firing, you're sort of like hoping that it's going to come out a certain way. And sometimes, if you've done things correctly, it will come out that way. But then other times, it comes out looking totally different.
Yeah.
And some cases, you're happily surprised by what it looks like, or sometimes you're like very disappointed in how it turns out.
I think both of those media require, you got to be strategic, but also flexible. So it's like striking the right balance between, kind of knowing your materials, but also being open to what they do.
Exactly. And I've learned from taking some ceramic classes that keeping a notebook, for example, in ceramics can be very important, because if you write down exactly what you did in terms of putting a glaze on or putting a number of glazes on, then when you get the final product back, you don't have to think, now, this looks really great. How did I do this? Well, if you write everything down, then you can relate back to your notes and try to reproduce it the next time.
Sketchbook strikes again.
Yes. Well, with ceramics too, some of it is like whether if your piece is fired in a certain part of the kiln that maybe be a hotter or cooler than something else, or it's affected by pieces that are nearby it, because the glazes give off different kinds of gases. And sometimes those affect your work, and sometimes you get something that's like really great and you don't know exactly how it happened.
I think all of this is exactly why I'm not a ceramicist. There's just too many variables that are that I can't pin down, but I'm glad it works for other people. So
Yeah,
tell me,
you have,
okay, go ahead.
like you say, you have to kind of hope for the best. And sometimes you're just tremendously surprised and elated by the results. And sometimes it's like, well, back to the drawing board.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about what influences and inspires your work.
Influences are, well, for example, in the turtle shells, I looked at things like Mondrian and some of the other people who did like color studies, where they basically drew straight lines and created different boxes that were related to one another, but then used different colors. And you find that matching colors one against another, you have complementary colors that offset and sort of make vibrant the color that's next to it. But also just kind of like shapes and how the shapes relate to one another. And that's more sort of a modern art kind of non-traditional way of looking at things. And so I like to look at some of those paintings that have been done by people much better than myself, and kind of think like, well, how does that look, and how would that look maybe on the shell of a turtle? And is that something you can pull off with glazes? Because What I found is that there's not a glaze for every color that you can get out of like a tube of acrylic or watercolors, things like that, which are much more, um, what's the term? There's a lot more colors available in those mediums than there are in glazes.
Yeah. Um, another thing, I need all the colors. I have to have all the colors. So it seems like you're into your turtles right now, but would you consider clay and ceramics to be your favorite art material these days, or there's something
Yeah,
new that you've discovered since you answered these questions?
I'd like to do more sculpture because it's easy, something that can be done in like a very simple workbench or workshop. You don't need, like, for example, making pots, you need a wheel. Um, Now with ceramics, of course, you have to have a kiln to fire stuff, but um, given that that's worked out, making sculpture is pretty easy. It's much like just drawing on a piece of paper because you don't need a lot of extra stuff to complete what you're doing. And you can hopefully use just what comes out of your brain or what you see and you want to copy uh, to make something new and different.
Um, you've taken a lot of classes at City College over the years. I've seen you around for a while, and it
I
sounds
have.
like you were there long before I was. So, is there any art medium that you see that you still like to explore that you haven't explored yet?
Well, I took some classes in Adobe Illustrator, which is a drawing program on the computer. And the thing that always stuck with me was a comment by the instructor that if you can think about something you want to do, this is the kind of tools that you can use to create it. In other words, Illustrator is so flexible and so dynamic, you can do almost anything that you've ever thought of. The trick is trying to get from what you thought of to the point where you can actually get it and create it on paper. And there's several times when I've worked with that program that it's like, I know how to do this, I've done it before, but I just can't remember exactly what tool you need to do and how you need to manipulate it to recreate something you've done in the past. And again, that's probably a failure of mine where you forget to take notes or you forget to write something down as to how something is created. And
Well,
then
and
you,
they change it all the time too. They always hide things or rearrange things on you in those
yeah,
Adobe
well, and you
programs.
try to use your memory to recreate things, and it's like, gee, I find as you get a little bit older, it's like, I know how to do this. Why can't I do it now?
Yeah. Somebody asked in the chat if you have any projects where you combined all of these different media together, your drawing or your two-dimensional practice and your sculptural practice together into one piece.
Um, I think the only thing close to that would be like the shells of these turtles. Frequently, I will sit with a piece of paper and just kind of draw something out with a pencil and then think, manipulate it, erase, and then redraw stuff or maybe throw something away and start over again. And kind of come up with something that looks like you want to do it on the particular turtle that you're working on. For example, maybe I can move this so that you could see, but yesterday I did a little demo with carving, and I have a turtle here that's partially done. And as you can see, the design, well, maybe you can't see, but the design is something that I created on paper, and I got it right here. And so this is the design that I want to recreate on the shell. And so it's just a matter of trying to copy something that you did on a piece of paper, but then on something that's three-dimensional. And that poses some interesting problems sometimes, and then to try to carve it out so that you can actually make it look like something when you glaze it. Because I think, as you know, glaze is not quite the same as paint because it's much thicker and more difficult to manipulate with a brush. But you just have to take all those things into consideration when you work it.
Yeah. I can see that. Bob, do you have any, if someone wanted to see more of your work or see your turtles in action or look up what you do you want to plug any sort of social media or website for yourself?
Well, I don't have a website, and social media, I've been sort of letting my partner, Elaine Bowers, who has a watercolor, I'm trying to remember the name of it. She has an Instagram page that we were using yesterday to broadcast our various demonstrations and so forth. And it might be Watercolor Whimsy, I think might be her Instagram page. But if people want to contact me and ask me about maybe doing a piece for them, or if they would like a turtle or something like that, they can just send me an email at ithinkIam@surewest.net.
Okay. I have a turtle in my yard. He might need a friend. So I might,
There you
I
go.
might reach out.
You'll have to send me a picture of your turtle, and so it might be something I could work off of.
Oh, well, I think I bought him from the Short Center, and he's very
Oh,
smooth and flat, but he looks good next to the succulents. So,
ah,
but I think another turtle might be in order. I've thought about getting a pet turtle, but what you talked about before is something that occurred to me, that that turtle would probably outlive me, and I best just enjoy my ceramic turtles.
yeah, they sort of remind us of our own, I guess, not fallibility, but necessarily there's an end to this story, and it's going to be there sometime.
There's a tortoise at the Oakland Zoo, a very large tortoise, and I think I wrote it as a child. And there's
Oh,
a picture
really?
of me sitting on a giant tortoise, and I can't imagine what other zoo it was in. And I went to visit the zoo with a friend's family, and it's the same tortoise. I know it's the same tortoise. It has to be the same tortoise, and they live for hundreds of years. They're very, you
Mhm.
know. So anyway, I looked that tortoise in the eye and thought, we've met before. I know you.
You didn't carve your initials on his shell or anything,
Oh,
then?
goodness, no, I would never. Well, Bob, it was a pleasure visiting with you today. I hope you have a wonderful tour, and I look forward to seeing one of these turtles in person eventually.
Thanks. It's always good to see you again, and maybe at some point I'll see you at City College.
That's where I live, except now I'm doing it from home, but yes.
Yeah,
All right. Well, thank you, Bob.
you're welcome.